Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday. How excited are you to have the week done? It's good to see you all. You are already lighting up the chat. Man, you're already ahead of the game. Good for you. And I know I was a few seconds late because about 3 minutes ago, I spilled a Coke all over my desk. So that's fun. Anyway, got it all cleaned up, got it on here. So anyway, it's good to see you all. Go ahead and put in the chat where you're from, maybe what line of work that you're in. I know I attract a lot of business owners, which is great. If you're not a business owner, if you have a business idea, let me know what your thought of a business is. And then finally, if you have an idea for a business, even that is fine too. But we are in here today because you're wanting to do strategic planning, and this is really the crux of what I do as a strategist. So I'm really excited about this one. I've not, I had one that I did a strategic planning session back in maybe June or July, I think. And I had evolved it into some other sessions, but I never came back to the strategic planning. And this is really, we're going to be talking about timelines today. And I kind of got away from that. And I was like, man, I really need to bring this back. So I'm really excited to do this. I'm doing this a completely different way. So if you are joining me, if you've been in sessions in the past, this is going to be a little similar to what you might have seen around the strategic business multiplier or the strategic business growth multiplier, business plans 101. It's a little similar to that, but where this differs is there's going to be timelines, and that's going to be towards the end. So if you've been here before, let me know. So I've got a couple people. I apologize if I mess up your name in advance. Is it Maurice? That looks from Montreal, Canada. Thank you very much for joining me today. This is Deborah, Nurses Night and Day Home Health Agency. Oh, that's cool. That's an in-home care agency, Deborah. That's really cool. Where do you do that? Let me know where you're from. Melvin, hey man, how is your tooth? I hope your tooth is feeling better, man. That's literally the worst. I hope you're feeling better. Hey, I'm here. So sorry to hear about that. Happens to the best of us. I know. And I set it down. For some reason, the little ring didn't come off. Like when you open it up, it normally stays on the bottle and it's like wonky. So I tried to pick it up and anyway, it spilled it all over the place. All right. I'm new. I'm from Mexico. Very good. It looks like Anaya. So I apologize if I'm getting that wrong. Paulette. Oh, hey, Paulette. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a bit. Good. Glad that you can be back here. Remind me where you're from. Deborah, you're from Houston, Texas. Okay, excellent. So let's get I'm glad that you can join me. Again, let me know if this is your first time here or if you've been here multiple times. I know several of you are repeat offenders. That is good to see you again. So thank you. I thank you very much for the trust. This is going to be a little bit of a review up front, so just hang in there because there are some people who haven't seen this material before, but we are going to get to the strategic planning session. Let's just said it's going to be, there's a timeline component to this, which is going to be near the end, but I'm going to make this very relevant to strategic planning as you're going into 2026 and then heading into the new year. So that's right, Paulette from Detroit. That now I remember. And then somebody from France, very good. Glad you can join. Seyduba, very good. And Robbie or Rabbi. Hi, I'm not sorry if I'm getting that wrong. Okay, all right. So let's get to it. So what we're talking about right now, well, as always, those of you know, I'm going to just ask you a couple of ground rules. Please don't multitask during this session. I want you to help train your brain not to wander off into different tasks. I know you're on your phones. I know you're on your computer. That's okay, but do your very best to try to train your brain not to multitask and head in all sorts of different directions, because here you are on a Friday afternoon. Some of you are Friday evening, and I want you to make the best time of what you're doing right now. So this is a big, big deal. And I want you to train your brain not to multitask, because you're not as effective as when you're multitasking, when you're wandering around. So for the next 54 minutes, try to stay plugged in. I'm going to try to get us out of here right at the top of the hour. I don't have any paid thing. There's no paid thing at the end. Just want to make sure that you are aware of that. Melvin says, I'm better, but still can't eat. Oh man, got to get that dentist appointment. Yeah, that is the worst. Tooth pain is the worst. So hang in there, Melvin. Glad you can join. Melanie from Louisiana. Welcome, Melanie. And Eating lunch. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, you must be west of me, right? I'm in the Midwest. All right. So this is what we're going to be talking about. So no multitasking. We're going to get right into it, but we're going to be talking about taking a strategic approach to managing your life and your business. Now, who is this specifically for? This is really basically anyone except for the one-man army who's trying to stay that way. Because the reality is, if you're trying to grow your business, which strategic planning, maybe you are like, hey, look, you're fine being a one-man show. But the reality is, if you're looking to grow your business, and this is generally what strategic planning is heading into, like, hey, I want more clients, I want better clients, I want people who are going to be sending me more money. This is the sort of thing that I just want you to be mindful of. Is when you are planning, you are going to need other people in your sphere, right? So this is about bringing in other people, but doing it strategically, right? Bringing in other people that are going to help you grow, that are going to help you expand. And then bringing in other people into your organization does have a scaling effect on your business. And you might be thinking, well, I don't want to hire anybody new. Well, it's not necessarily about hiring new people. It's more about, maybe it's about bringing in other vendors. Maybe it's about joint ventures or alliances or things like that. But whatever when you're bringing other people into your organization, it does have a scaling effect on your business. Fallon, hello, Fallon. It's good to see you from Connecticut. I hope we're scheduled to talk soon. I'm glad to see you on here. So I'm looking forward to our session. All right. So, and the reason why I'm saying that, Fallon, so she purchased the book bundle, so she gets access to that. So I'm looking forward to connecting with you, Fallon. Yes. Yes, we are. Okay, good. All right, very good. I was like, yes, we care. Yeah, I do care. All right, so let's get to the agenda right now. Again, a little bit of this is going to be a review for some of you folks who have been here before, but we are going to get to the actual planning session near the end. So we're going to talk about the systems component of every business, and then there's also the psychology component to the business. And then we're talking about the 4 core functions of business, which again has to exist in every single business. Every business has to have these 4 core functions. And then we're going to get to the actual strategic plan. And we're going to start to connect the dots between the systems and the psychology and the timeline. So all of these elements are going to start to make sense. And then this is what you're going to need to apply as you're heading in and finishing up the 4th quarter of this year, heading into the 1st quarter of 2026. Does that sound good? Does that sound good? This is the audience participation part of this, right? So this is the strategic planning part, which is going to be near the end. So again, for those of you who've been here before, this will be different. I just want to make sure that I'm making that point very clear. And then the resources, you can join us on the website or on the Facebook group if you are interested. Okay, yes, I'm getting some yeses. Fallon, very good. So glad you could join me, Fallon. So good to see you. Maurice, okay, excellent. All right, so let's talk about this business approach. And when you're taking a business approach, there are 2 components to consider. On the one side, you've got the systems side of the business, and on the other side of systems is psychology. All right, so we're going to talk about first and foremost is the systems piece. All right, so we're going to talk about this piece right here, which is, man, my mouse is all over the place. I don't know why, it's all sticky. So for those of you who are joining me late, I spilled soda all over my desk right before I signed on. So that's fun. Anyway, everything I'm going to be talking about is in this book right here called The Time Wealthy Advantage. It's also this book back here against the wall is The Time Wealthy Advantage. And this is about the Viper methodology for how I frame everything. And it's a top-down approach. So for those of you who've, again, seen this before, the Viper methodology, again, is that acronym. It's vision, infrastructure, process, execution, and reporting. Now, for those of you who might remember, vision has 2 components. Okay, vision has 2 components. And vision has a personal vision component, and it has a business vision component. Personal vision is specifically around where it is that you want to go. Now, we're talking about strategic planning, right? We're talking about strategic planning, and it's not just about your business. Strategic planning also includes you as the human being who the business should exist to serve. Did you see how I said that? The business exists to serve the human being. The business exists to serve you. Because at the end of the day, you should not be existing to serve your business. Because any business like that becomes a trap. Any business like that becomes a prison. So I really want to make sure, Paulette, The Time Wealthy Advantage is an awesome book. Oh, thank you, Paulette. I forgot. I was thinking that you got a copy of it, and because I feel like I've sent one to your direction. So I apologize if I missed that, but thank you. I appreciate the endorsement. Um, so I'd love to know your biggest takeaways out of the book sometime. So, personal vision specifically, where do you want to go? And I want you to think about this in specifically where it is that you want to go as a human. Again, if it's not defined by income generation, I am going to spend just a minute or two here on this personal vision component, because I feel like as business owners, and especially as entrepreneurs, especially in the early days, it's really easy to get hung up in your business, and it's all consuming. It's all you can think about. It's all you can talk about. And I get that. But at some point, it has to transition back to you as the human being, where your life is not defined by income generation. Okay. So again, if you woke up with $30 million or 30 million euros in your bank account tomorrow, what would your life look like from day to day? Okay. So now let's talk about business vision for just a hot second. If the personal vision asks where it is that you want to go in life, the business vision is going to say, okay, cool. How are we going to get there? All right. So the danger in never considering what your personal vision is, if you've only the danger in creating a business vision before you ever give any consideration to a personal vision, is that you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. And I'm just telling you, that's an empty well. So again, like I said, in the early days, that's fine. But again, if we're talking about strategic planning, let's get really clear about creating that personal vision just from a very rudimentary perspective. Okay. And again, this is something I like to refer to as the 100th birthday speech. If you're turning 100 years old, who would you want to be in the room? And what would you specifically say? And I know I had a really good conversation the other day with someone who was younger, and they were in their mid 20s. And I said, have you put together your 100th birthday speech? And for them, it was so out of context, because let's face it, when most of us are in our mid 20s, we're pretty sure we're going to live forever. Right now, I'm in my mid 50s, and I'm like, man, like, I'm here. I am feeling my mortality a little bit, like a little harder to get out of bed. But my 3-year-old does not care, right? I'm 53 and have a 3-year-old. But the point is that you start thinking about your milestones. So if you can't think of a 100th birthday speech, start thinking about a milestone, like a milestone birthday. So when you start thinking, okay, so if you're 25, what would your 30th birthday speech look like? Or maybe if you have some kids and you're like, well, when they turn 10, right? Maybe they're 2 now, and when they turn 10, and you're going to be 27 at the time, or 37 at the time, right? Whatever. But think about those milestones. If you can't really think of, if it's too far out, that's actually known from a psychology perspective. It's known as future self continuity, or the opposite side of that is future self discontinuity. So you can think about this thing where it was really interesting that when researchers, they asked people, they put these brain scanners on people, and they asked them to think about like Matt Damon or Beyonce, and the part of their brain that lit up was also similar to when they asked people to think about their future selves. Basically, their future selves was a stranger. So this is the interesting thing, is that when you start to think about your future self, if it's too far out, if it's too far removed, you start to think about your future self as a stranger. So again, maybe walk that back to a different component, all right, to something that's a little bit closer. But think about not only what you want to say, who would you want to be in the room, but what would you want others to say to you when you were done speaking, and what would be the message that you would want carried outside the room to other people. So these are the sorts of important things. Now we're going to put the fries in the bag and be done talking about personal vision for right now. But I'm going to bring this back up when we talk about timeline again. But I just want you to take that time and actually do that right now. So Shiana, you're located in Las Vegas. Very good. Oh, one other quick question. I know I get this question asked. There will be a replay. It will be emailed out later on. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, but there will be a replay that I'll be emailing to you in your inbox. So just watch for email that will come from markdolfini.com. All right. So we talked about personal vision. Now let's talk about business vision. When we talk about business vision, there are 3 C's of business vision. So they are core purpose, core values, and client avatar. Core purpose, core values, and client avatar. Why would this have anything to do with the price of tomatoes when it comes to strategic planning? Because if you're not clear on these, it's going to be really hard for you to plan. It's going to be really hard for you to come up with any sort of projections. It's going to be very difficult for you to come up with any sort of strategy for marketing or for sales or for products or for offers. It's just difficult. It just makes everything more difficult. And you have to do a lot more iterations only to come back to this exact same thing to realize, oh yeah, I guess we should have defined this. Take the time to define this stuff now if you have not done it already. So the core purpose specifically is, what business are you in and what problems do you specifically solve? And I want you to be highly specific. Take the time to get specific about the business that you're in. If I ask you and you say, well, what kind of business are you in? And you just say, oh, I'm in real estate. That's nowhere near specific enough. What does that mean? Do you do lending? Are you a wholesaler? Are you a realtor? Do you do commercial? Do you do residential? And you're like, yes, I do all of them. If you do, I'm telling you, it's just so fragmented. It's very difficult to be, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's just a lot more difficult to be successful when you're so fragmented across too many areas of one market segment. So take the time and segment that down and be specific about what business that you're in and what problems do you specifically solve. I can tell you when I was the happiest, when I made the most amount of money and had the most amount of time on my calendar, is when I got really, really specific about what it is that I like, that I was focused on. I really like educating small business owners and solopreneurs in the context of their business and helping them save time, helping them make some more money, and getting them time freedom back on their calendar. That's what I love to do. And that is my core purpose. That's what the core purpose. That's what I set Strategic Boardroom up to deliver to that avatar. Okay, we're going to talk about avatar here in a second, but you got to be really clear in your core purpose. Now let's talk next about core values. Now I'm just going to let you know, yes, this is super squishy, but hang in there. What matters to you about this business? Take the time and define that. What really truly matters to you, and how would the world be worse off if you are no longer in business? Why does that matter? Because core values is what determines company culture. And company culture and company brand have an inextricable link. Think about companies that have very, very strong company brands, right? Those of you who may be in the United States where there's Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has a very strong brand. And they have a very strong company culture. Southwest Airlines, the same thing. Think KLM, think Qantas Airlines, right? They have very, very strong brands. And that's because they have very, very strong company cultures. So these are the sorts of things that I want you to think about when you're, Marriott International, same type of thing, right? Very strong core values, very strong company culture. Because the brand, you have a very strong brand, the brand almost does its own advertising, right? If you've ever stayed at a Ritz-Carlton, you know what I'm talking about. You're like, oh yeah, they have a very strong company culture and the brand almost speaks for itself. So this is why it's important for you to take time about, if it's important to you as a human being, then it's probably important to you in your business. So think about that. Think about a core value that is really, really strong for you. And the way that you can define those core values that are important for you, just stop and think about this for just a hot second. Have you ever had a friend that wandered off the reservation in life? Or maybe it was a, someone you were in a relationship with, and they started to act in a certain way. They were behaving in a way where they were just heading down a path where you couldn't follow. As much as that sucks, that probably violated a core value for you. So if they, let's say for argument's sake, they started stealing, and you're like, dude, I'm not about that. Like, why are you stealing? Like, I'm not about that at all. And if it was a core value, so a core value is just a value, but how you know it's a core value is that if it's so strong in you that you're willing to get up and act, that's how you know something is a core value. We have lots of values. I value peanut M&Ms, right? But am I going to go box someone because they try to steal my peanut M&Ms? Like, dude, just take them, right? No. But if they tried to hurt my daughter, right? Like, it's going to be really ugly, because that's a core value for me, is to keep her safe, right? To keep my bride safe, to keep my children safe, right? That's a core value for me, okay? So Fallon's asking a question. I have a question about core purpose. What if I wear multiple hats or multiple business when describing yourself? How do one specific, I think you're how to determine to be specific on what they do. So the thing that I would answer, the way that I would answer that, Fallon, is you may have multiple businesses, and that's okay. I'll give you a good example. I run across this all the time in real estate. So my background is in real estate, right? And I have people who My first book was written called The Time Wealthy Investor. And that was really to help people learn to manage their rental properties that didn't take all their time. Okay. So people who want to grow their properties, want to grow their real estate portfolio, they're attracting a certain type of avatar, right? They're attracting a type of avatar that wants to sell properties to them. Make sense? That's a different avatar than people who maybe want to rent properties to. Those are two different conversations. Those are two different avatar. I would argue those are two different businesses, and I would treat them as two different businesses. So if you've got multiple things that you do, I would absolutely treat them as two separate businesses. Because here's the thing: what do? I write books. I hold webinars just like this. I train. I do consulting, I do one-to-one coaching, but those are all deliverables, right? Those are all things. And some of those things are more lead generation activities than anything else. So I do a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, I want to work and educate specifically a solopreneur or a small business entrepreneur. So the core purpose is about educating and helping them save time, helping them make money, and helping them get time back on their calendar. That's the thing. So the core purpose, you got to be really specific around that, because if you start wandering too far off in the core purpose and it doesn't deliver that, like again, right now, I'm educating small business owners and solopreneurs. That's what I'm doing right now. Even though this legitimately is also a lead generation engine for me. It's a lead generation activity for me, right? Because I get to demonstrate competence. I get to build trust with you by demonstrating competence. And demonstrating competence, I'm going off script here. This is a completely different thing, but demonstrating competence is the fastest way to build trust, right? And that's why, again, all of those activities, all roads have to lead to the core purpose. Okay. So I hope that makes sense for you, Fallon. But yeah, it is. It's very hard. And sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I have to make a decision. Like you're like, okay, which, you're kind of choosing between the dog and the cat. You're like, oh my gosh, I like them both, but this is difficult, right? So this is where you have to really get dialed in. And a lot of times when you're looking at it from two different businesses, it actually is much easier to segment in your own mind. So, okay, I'm getting an, okay. All right, good. So really, really good question, because that is tough. That is a tough thing to do. All right. So we talked core purpose. We talked core values, core purpose, core values. Now we're talking client avatar. You bet, Fallon. So client avatar is who specifically and ideally do you want to serve? And it's really important you get really specific around these individuals. So like, I really like working with married business owners who have kids at home and are really, really busy. And they also have faith of some sort, faith in God, like that's generally the people that I tend to attract, right? Now, will I work with single people? Will I work with other people? Will I work with people who don't really have faith? Yeah, I mean, but I'm just saying, like, they generally check all of those boxes, right? And that's generally who I attract. So I'm just saying, like, it's really important for you to delineate who those people are as best that you can. So if you do that and you start to break them down into three different areas, you break them down geographically, you break them down demographically, and you break them down psychographically. When you start thinking of geographics, that's just where they are. That's pretty straightforward. Demographics is who they are, right? Are they married? Are they single? Are they wealthy? Are they educated? Right? Those are the sorts of demographics that you want to break them down. And then finally, psychographics. And psychographics is how they think. The reason why you want to break these things all the way down this way is because in your strategic planning, you want to be able to reach these people in your strategic plan when you're marketing to them. So that way, when you start thinking about marketing in advance, you go, hold on a second. So I broke these people down. This is the kind of person that I want to reach, right? So let's say, for argument's sake, that they are married. That's a married couple, for example, and your geography is anywhere in your country, right? Say anywhere in France, anywhere in the UK, anywhere in the United States, right? So let's just say it's countrywide. So maybe there's a publication that's specific to your country, and you go, huh? Okay, so I know that avatar, right? And I know that they tend to read this magazine. So I'm going to put an ad in there that's going to reach this avatar specifically. Okay. So this takes strategic planning, because you don't want to just put an ad in there and not have an actual campaign, because you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, right? It's not just ever just a onesie twosie thing. You want to make sure that it's a true campaign, that you do this, and you've already planned what you're going to do on the backside. You've already planned what you're going to do if they go to your website, that you've already embedded a pixel so that when they go on their phone, your website is already showing up on other ads. You're like, huh, how about that? Like, didn't I just see this website? Ah, yes. Yeah, I did. Because I went to their website. I've got a pixel embedded, and all of that one ad, all of that is generated from one ad that they went to when they read the magazine. Okay. So I'm just saying, like, you have to reach your demographic or your avatar in as many multiple ways as you possibly can reach them. Right. So, Fallon, we've emailed each other. I've texted you. I have, sent you the package, right? So there's multiple ways that you've been reached out to because she purchased something, right? She purchased the strategic black box, and she's getting lots of value for that. Well, I hope, right? That's I can't speak for her, but I'm just saying, like, this is why it's important to try to reach your avatar in as many ways as possible, and just overload them with value. Give them lots of valuable things. Don't always go to them going, hey, are you ready to pay me more money? Because that will wear your welcome out very, very fast. And you might be saying, like, gosh, Mark, why are you like being so upfront about the way that you do this? Because I'm telling you, like, there's so many marketers out there that don't tell you the secret sauce. And this is it. This is everything. Like, just deliver something that's valuable to your avatar and don't ever, 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 ever stop. Like, these sessions, for some of you, you might have seen me. I did 1 or 2 of these sessions earlier in the spring. And guess what? I think this is my 20th session in 2.5 weeks. I did 7 sessions last week alone of these types of sessions. And I'm like, well, why are you doing so many? Because I want to deliver value to people. Because this is really what winds my clock. And it helps me work out a lot of different things when I'm putting together more books, more trainings, more things like that, because I really want to help people. First and foremost, I want to serve you guys. And yeah, I think the money will come eventually. I'm not really doing this for the money side of it so much, because most of my money comes in from real estate. I just enjoy doing this. I love teaching. So this is why I get to do this. But trust and know, when you break it down by geographic, demographics, and psychographics, you're able to reach your avatar much better. And that is what's going to make your strategic planning on fire. Does this make sense? Right? I took a little bit longer to explain that, but I just want to make sure that you guys understand this. So when you're defining your psychographics, I want you to think of this term ALIA, A-L-I-A. So this stands for attitudes, lifestyles, interests, and aspirations and goals. I kind of alluded to this a little bit, but what are their attitudes? Yes, it does. Okay, thank you, Fallon. So the thing that makes sense for when you're reaching these people is, what are their attitudes on life? What's their attitudes on, could be politics, could be anything like that. Certain things you got to be careful about in terms of their attitudes. But in terms of, lifestyles, what kind of lifestyle do they live? Are they living this jet setting lifestyle? Are they traveling a lot? Are they homebodies? Right? Do they spend a lot of time educating themselves, or do they just spend a lot of time kind of watching TV? Like, what's their lifestyle? If they're, are they workout people? Are they sedentary people? Right? What are their interests? Right? Are they bookworms? Are they, do they like watching movies? If so, what kind of movies do they like? Right? And their aspirations and goals. This is all really critical to putting together in your strategic plan. Okay. So thank you, Robbie. So this is it. So when you're looking at the 3 C's of business vision: core purpose, core values, and client avatar, please take the time to go through this stuff and really get clear on these 3 C's of business vision. I'm not trying to sound mean right now. Most of you won't do it. And I'm just telling you, like, it doesn't change my life, but it absolutely can change yours. But when you get really clear on this and you spend a lot of time ruminating about it and thinking about it and getting it really clear, I'm telling you, it's going to show up in a lot of different ways. And then you have to follow it up with action. We're going to get to that when we get to execution. So that is the vision piece. Next is infrastructure. We're not going to spend a lot of time on infrastructure. It's the bones of the business. It's the desks, the chairs, the software, things like that. Things that you would basically expect. But vision has to come first, because you're going to build an infrastructure that's in alignment with that vision. Okay. So you just have to think about that. When you're building out your strategic plan, you may have to have infrastructure improvements, and you need to budget for that. So you might think, okay, well, if this if this infrastructure improvement is going to be, $20,000 for this new program, then we need to budget for that, and you can amortize that over time. But I just want to make sure that we go through the infrastructure component. So we talked vision, we talked infrastructure. Next is process. Process is simply how you do stuff, right? So process is broken down into two areas. So process is both tactical and strategic. So when you're looking at your tactical side of process is basically how you do stuff from a day-to-day perspective. Your standard operating procedures, your checklist items, your day-to-day activities, how you answer the phone, your bank deposit procedures, your opening procedures, your closing procedures, things like that. It's just the boring day-to-day stuff, right? When you're looking at your infrastructure and your tactical process, that's the system part of the business right there. So I just kind of put a box around that. That's the system part of the business. So I'm just saying, like, from that side, I'm not really worried about that from a strategic planning perspective, unless they're just specific holes that you need to get plugged. But this is where the process part, where I've got this around strategic planning. This is really important when I'm talking about strategic planning, and we'll spend a little bit more time on this near the end. But there's three components to strategic planning, and this is people, purpose, and promotion. People, purpose, and promotion. When you're thinking about strategic planning, you have to consider the people that you're going to need that are going to help you. So for example, I represent some people component to the strategic planning for some people. Why is that? Because they're like, well, maybe they don't understand marketing well enough. And I have a deep and broad range of marketing knowledge, from an internet perspective, from direct mail to direct response, like all these different types of marketing pieces that I know, and I might be the person for one area, right? I can also help generally with people with their finance side, because I have a degree in accounting. I understand balance sheet and income statement, but I'm not the one to do the bookkeeping. So they might go, well, maybe we need to hire a bookkeeper, right? So you start thinking about the people component of the strategic plan. If you don't ever think about the people that you're going to need, all you're doing is creating a job for yourself. All you're doing is just creating more and more busy work for yourself, for yourselves. And this is the problem, is that when you're always thinking of how should I do something, not who should do it, you're creating a busier and busier and busier environment. And eventually you're going to get to a point where you can't keep it up. You won't be able to keep up all the activity, and things are going to start to fall apart. And when we talk about the 4 core functions of business, you'll see pretty quickly about how all these different functions they're very different. They're very different functions that need to be performed in every business. So you got to think about the people component that you're going to need, right? Who are you going to need, not to mention who are you going to try to attract? Now that's your client avatar, right? So that's the people component. The purpose of strategic planning is what direction you want to head in. So think about that. What direction do you want to head with your strategic plan? Meaning, are you trying to gain market share? Are you trying to, you might be trying to grow into a new market, expand into a completely different market, or vertically integrate into an existing market. Again, launching a new product or service or something along those lines. That is really important when you start thinking of your strategic plan. And the other side of that is when you start thinking, again, on the business vision timeline, we're going to talk about what's called RPM, revenues, profits, and metrics. When you start thinking about revenues, profits, and metrics, you want to do that so you can, what you want to do is create what's called a pro forma. I'm not going to get into pro forma today. I had it in there and I was like, oh my gosh, it would take me like 20 minutes just to kind of describe what a pro forma is, because I have to kind of explain what an income statement is and then explain what a pro forma is. And that it just wasn't working. It would made like this significantly longer. However, if you're not fully financially literate and you'd like to join me for that class, I don't think I've got one next week, but I think I've got one scheduled for the week following. So if you're interested in something like that, just keep an eye on the Eventbrite. If you follow me on Eventbrite, strategic boardroom, it'll let you know when the next financial literacy for business owners comes up. But so my point is around the revenues, profits, and metrics. That lets you know in advance what you're trying to grow, like what your expectations or revenues are, what the flow through will be in terms of your expenses, and then what your net profit margin will be because of this new strategic plan, right? Or strategic purpose. So I'm just saying, like, you got to think about that stuff in advance. So the purpose, again, might be gaining market share, launching a new product or service or whatever. It's really important that you align your strategic purpose with your core purpose. Where have you heard core purpose before? Core purpose is one of the 3 C's of business vision. So core purpose must align with strategic purpose. And why is that? Because if you start misaligning things where it's like, okay, let's pretend like, and again, I use this analogy all the time. It's like if Starbucks coffee starts selling chainsaws, it doesn't make sense. You're like, why in the world why are we selling chainsaws? It doesn't align, right? So again, what we're talking about is strategic planning. This is top down. It gets granular, but it doesn't get granular until the end. This is the sort of stuff that starts to get granular, okay? And the last piece is promotion. And most people skip this entirely. And I'm telling you, you do that at your own peril. Most plans will fall apart because they're not executed well, but they will also fall apart because they're not promoted well. And promotion is not just letting the world know in terms of promotion, like, hey, advertising, marketing, lead generation, right? That's critical, but it's also critical to convey that and communicate that clearly and multiple times with the people inside your organization, your vendors, your suppliers. These are the people that need to, be basically people doing fulfillment, right? So whatever that is, you need to make sure that you're promoting that outwardly and promoting it inwardly, and you have to do it a lot. So I did not put this in this session here, but when I talk about marketing magic or the business growth multiplier, you have to spend 60 to 70% minimum of your day on promotion activities, and that's if you're just wanting to grow your business. So if you're really wanting to expand, and I say that's minimum. So if you're working a 10-hour day, that's 6 to 7 hours per day on specific lead generation and promotion activities. That's just the reality. So and I would say that that's a minimum. So that's the strategic planning part of process. So I want you to think about it from this perspective with when you've got tactical and strategic. When you've got that tactical process and the infrastructure built out, that's your battleship. That's your warship. And it's sitting in the harbor. Strategic planning is saying, cool, we got this ship. Now let's take it out. Let's take it out in the ocean. Let's go make some trouble, right? That's what strategic planning does. The strategic planning component of process does. So I'm just letting you know, like, you have to be really critical. You have to be really clear about what you want to do, where you want to take that boat. Okay. So the next piece of this is execution. This is almost always where things fall apart because things are not executed well. And this quote, which I've said many times, a good plan violently executed now is better than the perfect plan executed next week. And that's by General George S. Patton. Most plans do fall apart in their execution because people don't take the time to whittle down their priorities. And having too many priorities has the same impact as having none. It's just like those of you out there who've got 97 things on your to-do list today. Okay. Again, at the time, if I had 3 hands, I'd put them all up because that's generally how I used to operate. Is I'd have 92 things on my to-do list that I was going to do today. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get to these things, right? So this is why I boil this down to a daily 5. Now, in terms of the daily 5, I'm going to get a little bit more granular on this. Gut check. Gut check. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the thing is, now I'm a proponent of the daily 5, but for me, the number for me is daily 3. If I have 3 things, I know I'm going to get them done. Today, this is one of my daily 3. But daily 5 is up to 5 highly specific actions that you can take that are going to move the needle towards your strategic plan or your vision. One of those 2 things, or it could be in either one or both, right? But your strategic plan should be in alignment with your vision. So at the end of the day, your daily 5, these are very highly specific things, not like check email, not like check voicemail, things like that. Those are not part of my daily 5. Are they part of my to-do list? Sure. Are they part of my routine? Sure. But are they part of my daily 5 activities? No, because my daily 5 activities, they may not even be the same things every day. In fact, some of them are the same every day, but depending on the day, They're not always the same thing. So I just want to make sure that you understand that these are things that are defined. Generally, I would recommend defining them the night before. So when it comes to reporting, and I want to make one quick point about this. I don't make this point in any others, but it's just something that for those of you who really have trouble with execution and you tend to wander too much, you're like, oh, hey, I'm just going to check Facebook for just a few minutes, right? Next thing you know, you've been on it for 30 minutes. Here's what I do, and I don't have a whiteboard handy, otherwise I would show you. But basically, in my conference room, which is where I work from, I have a whiteboard that sits next to me. And if I have random thoughts, I'm like, oh, I got to call so-and-so, and I'll jot it down on the whiteboard just so I don't forget it, right? But what I do, especially when I've got a really important thing that I'm putting together, like when I put this session together, I would have a start time, and I just put a start time, say like 7 a.m., right? And I do my 7 a.m. and I read, from 7 a.m. to 9:30, right? So I'm going to put read down. If I stop, anything that I do to stop, if I'm like going to go up and take a leak, if I'm going to go up and grab some coffee, I'll put like 8:14, which is the time, coffee, right? And I go, and then when I come back, then I sit down and I go. So anytime I'm stopped or interrupting myself, and again, I give myself permission to do all this. All this is a diary. That's all it is a time diary. So I'm not anything else, but anytime I get up and I have to pick it up and write down what I'm doing, I'm telling you, all of a sudden, it's a really neat way to help hold yourself accountable to actually getting things done. Time diary is one of the best things for that. That's how I got the book written. It's how I've gotten all my books written. It's how I develop courses, all the different things, right? I'm working right now through my PhD in the PhD program. And when I'm working on stuff, I have to do that. Otherwise I will wander and I will be all over the place. So I'm working on my 9th book right now called Leader Boss, and I'll have that done. I'll talk about that here in a second. So again, these are all really highly effective things. So in terms of reporting, you've got lead metrics and you've got lag metrics. Lead metrics are the things that precede lag metrics. That's why they are called lead metrics. Lead metrics are just based on the actions and activities that I do every day, and the lag metrics are the results of those actions and activities every day. So what's going to be in my daily 5 are my lead metrics. Those are things that I'm specifically aiming to do every single day. So again, if I have specific actions and activities that I need to get done, those actions and activities are going to be part of my daily 5. So I need to make sure that I've delineated what are daily 5 activities. And you might have 11 or 12 daily 5 activities. You're not going to do all 11 or 12 in that day, because then it'd be a daily 11 or 12, right? But you might say, okay, out of that 12, I'm going to do these 4 today, right? So that becomes your daily 4. Okay, fine, right? Whatever. But not every day you're going to do all of those different things, because there's different activities that need to be done on different days. So that would be my recommendation, is define and delineate those activities up front. So when you execute, and then you look at the lag metrics. The lag metrics are just the results of your actions and activities. That way, if you're not getting the results you want, all you got to do is adjust the activities. Look at your activities. Get an idea if you're doing the right things. And if you're not getting the actions, if you're not getting the results, then you just have to look at your actions and activities. I'll give you a quick example. One of the things that I was doing is sending out a direct mail campaign to people within the Midwest of a specific client type. They were in the HVAC industry, and I was getting no responses. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So we were doing a campaign. Many of them received 4 and 5 letters within, right? So it was about every 3 weeks they were getting a letter. And I was getting no responses. I mean, I sent out thousands of letters over the period of about maybe 4 or 5 months, and I was getting nothing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this sucks, right? But I was like, okay, they clearly are not responding, right? And I knew that they were opening it because we were hand addressing the envelopes, right? So the results just told me what you're doing isn't working. Okay, I need to do something different. So I pivoted. So I'm just saying, like, don't be salty about the results, but make sure that you're taking actions and activities that are measurable, and then you pivot based on the results. All right, so that's the Viper methodology. That's the systems component. Now let's talk about the psychology. This is the mental and emotional side. Systems are great. Systems are important, but they're only going to get you so far. So systems offer stability and consistency and accountability, but they are limited in that they make objective decisions great, but not so much with subjective decisions. And adapting to rapid market changes is not a strength of a system, or coming up with creative solutions, or even maintaining human connections. look, I get it. AI is a great tool, but there's just certain things where it's limited, right? It's just hard. Like I'm doing this on my own, and I'm referencing Robbie and Fallon and Shiana. Like these are things that make it tough for AI, right? Especially when people find out, oh, that's your AI bot, that wasn't you. I don't know about you, but I kind of get salty on that, right? So we talk about systems, let's talk about psychology. Psychology, there's both an individual and personal psychology, and there's business and organizational psychology. When you're looking at personal psychology, you're talking about things like self-worth, self-management, and limiting beliefs that we carry around. When you're talking about organizational psychology, you're talking about external psychology and internal organizational psychology. So let's talk about that for just a second. Business and organizational psychology has external components and internal components. The external components deals with things like buying psychology and vendors, and negotiations and things like that. Even politics play a role in external business psychology. But when you're looking at internal psychology, you got things like management and leadership, and those things are really, really important to the effective strategic planning of your organization. You have to bake that in the cake, because the 3 pillars model of leadership that I put together, there's these 3 pillars of leadership. They have to exist in leadership, or you're just not going to be effective. And they go down to trust, vision, and communication. And when you're putting together a strategic plan, you have to consider how much your people trust you, what is your vision for what you're trying to accomplish in the future, and how are you going to communicate that? And if any one of these 3 things is missing, you're not going to be effective as a leader. And you might be thinking, well, does leadership really matter that much? Look, I'm writing Leader Boss right now, and what I find with most people, especially small business owners, is they either have too much caring or too much candor. And if they have too much caring, what ends up happening is they get walked all over. If they have too much candor, then they become a tyrant, and your people will do the bare minimums and nothing more. And that's the problem, right? So you have to have equal amounts, I would argue, equal amounts of both caring and candor, and have these tough conversations when they need to be had, but do it because you care about your people. So does leadership really make a difference? Look, Jim Collins, who was the author of Good to Great, Great by Choice, Built to Last, he referenced these leaders, these CEOs and heads of these companies as level 5 leaders. And he tracked all these really big names, big companies that really did something special in terms of stock returns. And these level 5 leaders led companies that were significantly more profitable. They grew much faster. They had a much stronger company culture, and they had a defined set of core values. So this is just an example of one of the data set of companies that came in from Great by Choice. This was Great by Choice. So Amgen, Intel, Microsoft, Southwest Airlines. These were companies that grew 24 times. For example, Amgen grew 24 times larger or faster than the market for over a course of 30 years. So just imagine what a $10,000 investment would have been in Amgen compared to the market. Or Southwest Airlines, right? 63 times the market, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, so when you're looking at the list of the 100 best places to work, it almost always represents companies with the highest stock returns. And this is because of leadership. So leadership does make a huge difference. And the reality is, because growth requires change, and leadership is what manages that change. So I just want you to stop and think about this from this business approach, but both systems and psychology, is it takes both elements. And both elements serve the 4 core functions of business. So that's the next component here, is the 4 core functions, which has to be true in every business. And those 4 core functions are lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. And your customer's journey in your company happens in this order. It happens in this order. So let me just ask you, are all these things the same skill set? Obviously, they're not the same skill set. That's why you need people. So let's get to the strategic plan part of this, right? So you're going to plan, and this is about the process part, right? The process, again, we talked about this a little bit, is the strategic planning, where you've got the people, the purpose, and promotion. So because when you're looking at the 4 core functions of business, you have to bring in people into your organization that are not going to be where you can't handle the lead generation, the sales, the operations, and accounting, and think that you're going to do all of those things extremely well, right? That's the thing. So when you're looking at your lead generation is letting the world know that you're out there and what it is that you do, right? When you're thinking about the sales function closes the conversation that was started with your lead generation. So that's why your lead generation and your sales have to be in alignment. That's why you need to strategically plan about what lead generation are you putting out there, and what is called the conversion tool. What's the conversion tool that I'm going to use to convert that person from a lead to a prospect? They are now someone who says they've raised their hand. They said, Fallon, I want to know more about you, right? Shiana, I want to know more about what it is that you're doing, right? For example. So I just want to make sure that you stop and think about this, that you start to give some real thought in advance of what your lead generation is going to be, what your sales is going to be, and then the fulfillment piece, right? The operational function. So we talk lead gen, we talk sales. The operational function is generally what you do, what the business does, right? You're an operational person. You're building websites. You're building. You're a real estate person. You put roofs on people's houses, whatever that is, right? That's the operational function. And generally, if people are going to get stuck, that's where they get stuck. They get stuck in the operational function. And then finally is the accounting function. And the accounting function is generally, if you're going to ignore something, it's almost always the accounting that gets ignored. So you've got the lead gen, the sales, the operations, and accounting. Those four functions have to operate, and generally that's not going to be all done by the same person. That's why you need people, and that's why you need to start to consider people in your strategic plan. So have you ever thought, and I want to answer this question, have you ever thought, man, I've got all these ideas, but I have no idea where I'm going to implement them or find the time to implement these ideas, right? This is why I've come up with a business vision timeline. So what you're going to do is, I like to break this down by 36-month timeline. I like to break it down first by 36-month and 12-month timelines. So when I'm breaking these down, I want you to think of RPM. Okay. So you're thinking this and you're projecting out what your revenues are going to be for 36 months. So you might be thinking, okay, so you're going to project your revenues. And now, again, think of RPM: revenues, profits, and metrics. Revenues, profits, and metrics. Revenues are your sales. Your profits are your revenues minus your expenses. And then you're going to project your whatever metrics you're going to have. So the metrics would be, well, that's if I had, 10,000, if I sold 10,000 more widgets, or if I brought in 100 new clients, or, whatever that is, right? Or if I sold 50 more houses, that would be your metrics. So again, remember we talked about metrics back in the reporting function, your lead metrics and your lag metrics. That's the kind of metrics that I would be talking about. So some of them may be lead metrics, some of them may be lag metrics. Some of them you may have direct control over, some of them you may have no control over. And that's why I'm saying, start to think about what those metrics would be on a 36-month timeline. You think, why 36 months? Here's the thing. I've known people who come up with these 25-year plans. I'm not suggesting that 25-year plans don't have value. The problem is there is so many variables outside of 36 months. Even within 24 months and 12 months, there's a lot of variables. But when you get outside of 36 months, there's so many variables that can't be accounted for. That think about the person who came up with a 25-year timeline in 1998. All right. Think about that. Think about all the different things that happened between then and 2023, right? I'm just saying there's so many things that are different, from the Great Recession to all these different, heads of state, to the pandemic, to all these different things that happened. All right. So this is why I want you to think, I prefer a shorter timeline, which would basically be a 36-month timeline. If you are coming up with a personal vision timeline, I don't have a problem with you projecting something beyond 36 months just to kind of say, hey, look, it's going to be someday, but I really would like to say beyond 36 months, I'm just going to kind of put an infinity symbol on that. because I want something that's well defined that I think I can reasonably have within 36 months. And I want that to be a stretch. I want that to be wow, that would be life changing for me. My 12-month business vision timeline, again, you're going to think revenues, profits, and metrics, doing the same thing. Now, here's what I want to put this slide up, and I want you to think about this. Most people vastly overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and vastly underestimate what they can accomplish in 3. I want you to flip that. When I go back to this page, I want you to have a 36-month timeline that would knock the cover off the ball, that would change your life. I want you to have such a crazy, be pragmatic, right? But I also want it to be such a stretch for you that if it came true, it would absolutely make a huge change in your life. And because that's the reality is in 36 months, you can actually hit that. The other thing about having longer business vision timelines or vision timelines in general is that it can disguise and hide inactivity. So in other words, let's say for argument's sake, I say, man, I really want to have 6-pack abs. Okay. Now I'm in my 50s and I've always been athletic and I'm probably not that far away from having 6-pack abs again if I really wanted to. Right. But I'm going to in the next 7 years, I want to have 6-pack abs. Really? You can't do anything about that right now, right? Because makes it a lot easier for me to go home and lay face down on a plate of brownies. So I'm just saying, make sure that your business vision timeline isn't something that's just something that you could probably get if you just really buckle down, and you could probably have it maybe in 10 months. But I want you to make that 36-month timeline something that's a big stretch. Make the 12-month one a little bit more pragmatic. Okay. Don't have this crazy big one for 12 months and you think you're going to have this crazy, crazy, crazy big one for 36. I want you to have one that's 12 months. It's maybe a little bit maybe 10 or 20% more of where you're at now. And I want your 36 month to be like knock the cover off the ball. Is that making sense? Making sense? So that's what I want you to think about in terms of your business vision timelines. So the other things I want you to think about in your business vision timelines is how you're going to break those things down. So you've got 36-month and 12-month. Those are defined by revenues, profits, and metrics. Now, my 12-month business vision timelines, I'm going to break those down into 90-day projects. And the 90-day project is going to be in alignment with my 1-year vision, So I'm chunking this down into 90-day projects. From 90-day projects, I break them down into monthly goals and weekly goals. And guess what I break down my monthly and weekly goals into? I break them down into a daily 5. That's right. So this is where the daily 5 comes into play in terms of execution. This is where it comes full circle. This is why I had to take a while to get here. And I lost a bunch of people because they're like, I'm out. This is taking too long. Okay, sorry. Maybe they'll watch it on replay. I have no idea. But the point is, this is where the daily 5 comes in. This is where you guys got to the promised land, because this right here, this daily 5 is what brings it all together. So that way, my daily 5 is going to be in alignment with my weekly goals. It's the stuff that's going to I'm going to get to the end of my week and go, cool. I got to the end of the week. I didn't hit my goals in terms of my activities, but I did hit some other things, but I can adjust that for the following week. And then after 4 weeks, guess what? I've got a monthly goal. How did I do overall in the month? Right now, I'm 1/3 of the way through my 90-day project. Okay. Right now I do it again and again and again and again. Now I'm at month 2. I'm 2/3 of the way through my 90-day project. And that's all in alignment with my 1-year business vision and all in alignment with my 3-year business vision. This is how books get written. This is how projects get started, how courses get started, how buildings get built, how really big, cool things get done, is you chunk them down. And this is the best way to chunk them down. All right. So hopefully this is making sense for you. But I also want to give you just a couple of other things just to consider before we put the fries in the bag today. So I want you to think about these 8 leadership dimensions, because you all fall in one of these 8 dimensions. You probably have a couple of components within either, but I'm just going to make the point between a pioneering type leader and a humble leader versus an affirming or resolute leader. So this is based on a DISC personality matrix. So if you recognize any of these attributes, it's on purpose, because it's part of the DISC personality matrix. For those of you, if DISC is very, very popular, it's been around for a long time. But if you're looking at a pioneer type leader, that's the one at the very top at the 12 o'clock. That is a person with a very, very strong action bias, meaning that they'll take action very quickly, often with very little information. They're highly innovative. They can be really persuasive. But here's the problem with a pioneering type leader. And this is why I'm bringing this up now, because you do need other people in your organization. This is great. You take action. That's fantastic. But the problem is you drive everybody around you bananas because you're not giving them the necessary support that they need on the other side of the motivation that stirs them all up. So, conversations tend to be very one-sided, and it leaves their followers behind. So for you to really start to consider how you show up as a leader, it's really important that you think of yourself. If you're a pioneering leader, maybe you need to bring in more aspects of a humble type leader. A humble leader, they are much more intentional, but they also tend to be very people pleasing, right? They're very reliable. They love routines, but they often take forever to move on something, right? It's like, well, let's do another study. Let's table this for another meeting. No, the pioneering leader like ready to jump out of their skin, and the humble leader's like, no, let's think about it some more, right? Sometimes it's just you got to move forward. You're not going to have perfect information, okay? And some of you in here are pioneering. You're like, yep, that's me. And some of you in here are humble. You're like, yep, that's me. You got to find a way to bring in other people that accent where you're weak, right? So, they tend to adopt the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. And that's not great, especially if you're trying to be the head of an organization that's trying to grow, if it's trying to do something different. So this often will close the humble leader off to new ideas, and it leaves them vulnerable to changes in the marketplace, especially when changes are very rapid. Okay. So we talked about the pioneering leader and the humble leader so you got 12 and 6. When you're looking at your 3 o'clock or your affirming leader, these are amazing collaborators. They're really warm. They're really good at building a supportive environment, which makes them extremely approachable. That's fantastic. The problem is they don't like conflict. They have an aversion for conflict, which means that they avoid really tough conversations, and they're more relationship oriented than results oriented. So they don't tend to see the inefficiencies that might be really, really obvious to other people. And so they choose not to address the problems just because they're somewhat resistant to change, right? They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So again, that's not a bad thing. That's really great for collaboration. But sometimes it's like, like if an affirming leader, and of course I'm being extreme here, but if an affirming leader like drives up on a car wreck, okay, your resolute leader is going to be like, you do that, you call 911, you do this, you call emergency services, right? That's the resolute leader. The affirming leader would be like, okay, hey, let's all get together and talk about our feelings right now, right? And I'm being funny, but I'm just saying, like, there's a time for being resolute and there's a time for affirming, but you just have to recognize that if you're more affirming, then you have to set that aside sometimes to have tough conversations. Remember, we talked about caring versus candor. You have to be able to set that aside. If you truly care about people, then you have to have candor type conversations with them. Let's talk about the resolute type leader. Again, these are very strong-willed and they are very persistent. And they love that, they tend to give others courage, especially in very tough times. They will speak their mind. They will not have trouble knowing who the resolute leaders are. They love to debate. They love problem solving. You give them a tough problem, they will work on that for days and days and days until it's done. And they're also highly driven towards personal mastery. And basically the only problem with them, like, there's lots of problems with them, right? So the problem is that many people often start with a 1 in trust. Like, from a 1 out of 10, everyone starts at like 1. Like, you got to demonstrate your trust for me. Like, they're very slow to trust. So they have a very strong, they're naturally skeptical. They have a very strong opinion of how things should work versus how they are working. And, they really do love to solve problems, but they also tend to work on their own with very little collaboration. They won't ask for help very often. So again, there's 4 other type leaders. There's commanding, there's energizing, inclusive, and deliberate. And those are kind of the midway points of each one of those 4 that I just gave you. But when you hear this on replay, I want you to think of like where you're at and finding your opposite to help you lead this organization in your strategic plan. Because if you don't, this last piece here, execution, will not happen. Because again, it takes a really strong leader to make sure that stuff gets executed on. So I'm just saying, like, this is all really important stuff. The last component here, we talked about the systems, the psychology, the 4 core functions, the strategic plan. Last is the resources. This is just a page I just want to share with you guys. This is the end of the presentation. Oops, this is the presentation, but I'm going to give you guys a website or a Facebook group if you'd like to join me. It is, I promise not to blow you guys up too much. Let me just go ahead and copy this. And that way you guys, if you would like to join me, you're more than welcome. And that's all I have. So again, you will be getting a replay on this in your email. Thank you guys for sticking around, and hopefully you found this helpful. But the main thing about this is, what are you going to do to implement it? What are you going to do to integrate this? And it's really important that you take the time to think about how you're going to integrate this strategic plan, and just keep it nice and simple for now. Your 36-month, your 12-month, your 90-day projects, your monthly goals, your weekly goals, and your daily 5. Don't make it overly complex. Otherwise, you're not going to execute on this thing. All right. So hopefully I will see you guys in the group. Thank you so much for sticking around. See you guys next time.